Welcome everyone to Our Whole Lives Taking Flight webinar series. My name is Amy Johnson. I am the Minister for Sexuality Education and Justice in the United Church of Christ. And I am here co-hosting today with Melanie Davis. Melanie? I think you're muted.
Yep, I'm Dr. Melanie Davis. I am the Unitarian Universalist Association's Our Whole Lives Program Manager, and both Amy and I are Our Whole Lives trainers. And we would like to welcome Robin Slaw, who is a credentialed religious educator in the Unitarian Universalist movement and is Director of Religious Education down in, Robin, you're
Columbia, Maryland.
Columbia, Maryland, and the author of Parents and Caregivers as Sexuality Educators. And we're so pleased that Robin is here today to talk to you, all of us, about the program and about its use for online times, whether now or later on. Amy, is there anything you'd like to say before Robin goes on?
Just like to welcome everyone again, and we really appreciate all of your support for these webinars that we've been doing since May, and we'll continue to do monthly throughout 2021. At least that is the plan at the moment. If you have questions today while Robin is presenting, please look at the bottom of your screen and use the Q&A feature. Melanie and I will be moderating that. We will save most of the questions and answers for the end of our time today, but if there's anything that's really timely or urgent, we'll see if we can squeeze that in at some point during Robin's presentation. We'll have a few announcements for you at the end, and this is being recorded, so that will be up on the UUA and UCC Our Whole Lives pages later this week. And with that, over to you, Robin.
All right, thanks, Amy and Melanie. I think it's probably also worth mentioning that I'm an OWL trainer, and at some point in my life, years ago, I was a Planned Parenthood educator and trainer. And that's really where I started learning about the need for parents to be able to talk about how they can educate their children around sexuality issues. And so I've been doing this type of program for 2 decades about. So I want to start with describing what the program is in case you're not familiar with it yet. It's a small group ministry type of program, which for the Unitarian Universalist version includes a covenant or a promise of the kinds of behavior that we will engage in while we're in this group. And it includes readings and videos and discussions that reflect the values of Our Whole Lives program. So it's very much so enmeshed with Our Whole Lives. And I know that Amy will talk about this later, but there is a UCC version in the works. And the intention of the program is for parents and caregivers to discuss their feelings around sexuality topics before they talk to their children. And the program invites adults to ask themselves, what can I do to embody my role as a child's primary sexuality educator in a way that expresses my values and faith? The sessions are designed to meet the needs of any adult who's raising children in a wide age range, from elementary through high school or even young adults. Part of the purpose of it is to build comfort in talking about sexuality-related topics. Many of the sessions in the program offer skill building activities, so you get to practice the kind of conversations that you want to have before you have to do it with your child or children. It invites adults to ask themselves, how can I embody my role as a child's primary sexuality educator? Oh, I read that already, sorry. It invites them to engage deeply with their hopes and fears, because we all have them as parents. And it asks us to identify our values and practices. And then it offers resources for continuing education, because we want to stay up to date. The world is constantly changing. There are new ideas around sexuality all the time. And we want to make sure we're up to date and know about options and issues. I want to talk about the fact that this is not really a class. This is a question I've received a lot. It's a program that's meant to help caregivers think through issues first and talk with each other about best ways to discuss with children. And it's really less about transmitting information, although there is some of that in the program, and more about listening and being curious and sharing meaning and significance. We as adults, as parents, may not have had that type of modeling of deep listening and discussion with our own parents. And so this program gives us a chance to think through our own experiences and our own thoughts before we start talking to our children. And parents are often worried about doing it wrong and alienating their children. And that's partly because teen sexuality is a fraught topic, right? There are lots of feelings about it, lots of mixed feelings about it. We want to be able to trust our children. We hope we've raised them with our values. And then we see what's going on in the world, and that can cause concerns. So, what are some of the things that could go wrong with parents? Perhaps they don't know the right words or the right answers. And, there's a lot of slang language out there. I just embarrassed myself. Literally last week at the dining room table, I asked my young adult children, what does this word mean? And they fell off their chairs. They were laughing at me so hard, partly because they know I'm a sexuality educator and they don't expect to hear those from me. But, I'm not perfect at keeping up. We're worried about the scorn of our children because we don't know enough or because we have old-fashioned attitudes. We might be afraid of giving too much or too little information. Parents might be afraid of giving information at the wrong time, or being afraid of alienating or saying the wrong thing, or that their kids will even stop talking to us, or that we don't know enough. And when we ask our parents what they want for their children, they say they want healthy, loving relationships, which include sex positivity, safety, and maintaining communication with their children. So what happens if we don't talk to our children? The biggest problem or issue is that they're curious. And so what might happen is that youth might experiment more or at earlier ages. And we do know that when teens are able to talk with parents or other significant adults about sex and protection, number one, they're less likely to engage in early sex. Number two, they're more likely to be in a committed relationship with a partner. And number three, they're more likely to use contraception. So the benefits are strong for the reasons why we want to talk to our children. To identify the participants that would gain value in this program, parents are an obvious choice. There might be grandparents who are helping raise children, especially now during the pandemic. They might be the adults that are with children while parents have to go out. This is a good program for foster parents and any other caregivers that are working with children in lots of different ways. So I want to share my screen and talk to you about the elements of the program.
Robin, can I just ask a question? How do you think that this would work in terms of bringing it into the community or inviting community members into a church or congregation's program?
I think it'd be great to be able to do that. It's not a specifically religious program, even though it does involve the values that we espouse in our common religions of Unitarian Universalist and United Church of Christ. So it's a secular program. When doing that, I would be more careful to explain the values that are behind the program so that parents and other adults understand what they're getting into.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in just with two things there. And the first one is that you mentioned the UCC program, and we are working with a couple of people to bring in some, to actually bring in some scripture and things like that. So that version of the program will be more faith-based, but also not that this one isn't faith-based, but it will have more, I guess, pieces of Christianity. Perhaps would be some Christianity practices in it. However, sometimes that is not a deal breaker for community involvement, and sometimes other churches are interested in being involved. So So stay tuned for that. We're hoping that will be out later, sometime later this spring. And then the other thing, Robin, we did get a question. I just wanted to lift it up verbally here in the chat. Does this require an Our Whole Lives trainer or facilitator? And so I just wanted to say, no, it doesn't. I mean, I can see where that could be really helpful, or somebody with a background, or having somebody who's had an Our Whole Lives training to be a consultant with you if you have questions or that kind of thing, but it is not a requirement. This is written for people to be able um, to pick up and use as a small group ministry in their faith communities.
And I'm actually going to get into a little bit more of what type of person you would want to find in a facilitator in just a
Great.
little bit. So I'll
Go
go
back at ya.
into more detail about that. All right. Sharing my screen, I wanted to talk to you about the actual, what do I want to say? All right, why can I not get my screen to actually, oh, it's not running. There we go. I want to talk to you a little bit about the actual elements of the program. So the opening really introduces the topic. It's a short opening. It welcomes the group, and there's a small reading involved. For Unitarian Universalist congregations, they might choose to light a chalice at that point. The focus check-in invites everyone to really look at the topic and their own feelings about it, at least the initial feelings, and it invites them to consider a question, a specific question of their reactions to this topic. The spotlight further introduces the topic and sparks some thoughts and feelings about it. It's often a video or other spoken element. And then in the perspectives, that's if we're offering some specific information or education, that's where it usually happens. We provide some facts and figures sometimes, or youth perspectives on that particular topic, or discussion of a cultural trend. And this might include videos or information sheets or readings or brainstorming and discussions. And then the reflection is the part that's the small group ministry aspect. And that is specific questions that we ask participants to reflect on. And I suggest that people journal while they're thinking about the questions. And then we get into some of the personal sharing and deep listening that's involved in small group ministry. The taking home part are sometimes questions to be thinking about how you will apply this new knowledge and understanding to your children at home. Sometimes it's a role play, so you get to practice some of those skills before you take it home. And the closing is a reading with a message, just to close up the topic and walk away from the situation. And then there are currently 10 sessions for the program as it's published right now. Hopes and concerns for kids' sexuality health really comes into play about here are my dreams for my children. Here are my fears for my children. And what do I need to do? What kind of internal work do I need to do to relieve those fears? Communication, the second session, is how do we talk about sex in a healthy way and not transmit maybe some of the negative feelings that I have, because that's what I was taught as a child. It's all about building positive relationships. Those two, we ask that you do those 2 sessions for every time you run the program, and then all the rest are optional. And the first session offers a worksheet so you can query all the participants about which sessions they consider most important. And so you can choose to run as many sessions as you want. Gender identity and sexual orientation are fairly self-descriptive. What the sessions do is ask parents to look at their own areas of discomfort and start to get comfortable with those topics. Relationships, it starts with talking about what are the right ages for developing skills for healthy sexuality, and perhaps disabusing those of us who are parents from some of the notions that we were taught as children, or that society and culture tells us is the right thing to do. Decision making is acknowledging that we have some fears around our children and how we can develop trust in our children and their ability to go forward with relationships. So this is where it starts to shift to an emphasis on older children, which does not eliminate parents of younger children still participating in the program. Decision making, consent is all about how do we teach our children to engage in consensual relationships? How do we give our children the skills to back away from non-consensual actions? Social media is encouraging talk with our children about social media and what might happen there and what to do about it. And pornography is a session that talks to parents and caregivers about how to help mitigate what they might have already been exposed to and how to broach the topic with our children. I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I do want to tell you that there are 2 additional sessions that have been written, and they're under development with the UUA Faith Engagement Office, but not yet released. And those are sessions on unplanned pregnancy and ethical non-monogamy. And they're topics that are important, especially for our older children and teens. We want to be ready for those discussions before we're hit with them.
Robin, we just have a couple questions, like logistical questions that
I'm going to get into it.
Yeah, so I figured you would, but just so you know what's coming up, a question about how many facilitators and the class size. So if you could include those, that'd be great.
I will. I have absolutely included details about those. Thank you, though. So facilitators, who do you want to choose? So partly you want someone who's comfortable with sexuality topics. They want to be modeling that level of comfort that we hope we can develop in our parents. And then you also want someone who has had some experience leading small groups. This is not a class, right? So it's not teacher skills, it's not lecture skills that we're looking for. We're looking for skills as facilitators who can encourage conversation and encourage deep thinking and deep sharing, because those are the goals of the program. We also want to make sure that all our facilitators know the state and local mandatory reporting guidelines, because this is sexuality and that's important. We always want to make sure that our facilitators that are talking about sexuality issues know what those requirements are. I want to talk a little bit about moving this program online and what those challenges are and what some of the benefits are. So one of the big things that you will want to pay attention to when you move online with this program is the visuals. There are lots of brainstorming on a flip chart, instructions, and that type of thing. I'm going to share my screen again, because I have some examples of alternative ways that you'll be able to do things like that. So this is a chart that I build. I am co-leading these programs right now with the minister. And we decided to make this chart to put the timing in there, so we make sure that we're watching each other for timing, and we're putting the activity. And then in the box all the way on the right are the things that we want to be able to put in the chat screen or share screen with the participants, so that it's easy for us to cut and paste right in the moment what it is that we want to be able to do. And then some of the discussion type of topics where you would have somebody moving around with Post-its, putting them on flip chart paper, or if there's a ask a question and then go stand in a line, whether you agree and disagree, a forced choice type of activity, you can do those on Jamboard. And this is an example of the Jamboard that I will be using actually tomorrow for asking parents to think about when these type of things might happen. So you can put text boxes in there and then little Post-it notes that you're actually able to pick up with the mouse and move to the correct place. And so that's just one suggestion of alternative ways of being able to use an electronic form of what we would be doing with our bodies if we were in person. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other options out there that creative people will be able to use, but those are the two that I could think of. We have chosen to recruit readers ahead of time when there are scripts or structured conversations or role playing that needs to be done. We recruit them ahead of time and send them the script ahead of time so that they have it there and we don't have to deal with emailing people in the moment. And I have
Robin, can you do you mean they practice ahead of time, or that you pre-record the scenario?
They get the script ahead of time and get to practice ahead of time, not even necessarily with each other, but that way they have what they need and we don't have to take time to send an email, wait for the email to arrive and them to open it. It's all there and they have it printed or whatever they need in order to be able to do that kind of participation.
Thank you.
And if it's possible, use a tool to download the videos because there are a lot of videos in this program. And there's lagging when you're trying to both download a video from online and then redistribute it, uploading it again. And so there are a lot of utilities that are out there. I'm not a good person to say which one is better, but do your research and choose a utility to download the videos. A lot of YouTube videos have even a download button that you can just click on it and download it, and that helps with lagging. One of the most challenging things for us to do when we're doing this program online is to recognize when there's discomfort and then be able to address this discomfort in the moment. And so for that reason, I recommend having 2 facilitators for all the virtual online programs that you'll be running, because that gives you the person talking and presenting, and then another set of eyes who can really be scanning the participants and paying attention to what's happening. Because you do want to be able to pay closer attention to people who are exhibiting discomfort and figure out how to handle that perhaps after the fact, but maybe even in the moment, be able to address discomfort. There could be, because this is sexuality topics, there could be self-disclosure of prior trauma on the part of parents or caregivers. There could be previous child abuse or sexual assault that parents are struggling to deal with. And it's important for us to be able to pay attention to it in the time and then with follow-up later. So some of the benefits of offering this program now are that we can't do OWL online. We can do little parts and sections of it and not call it Our Whole Lives. But this is a way for us to be helpful to parents who are concerned about children that are entering high school, that are starting to have a little bit more freedom and flexibility. Maybe they're starting dating and they don't know how to talk to their children about this. So this is a way that we can really help our parents. And I'm finding it very easy to translate to online use, to virtual use. There's a little bit of prep time, but it's the same amount of prep time for me that it would have been if I'm standing there writing on flip chart paper ahead of the session. We choose to send out handouts and the link to the videos ahead of time. That way parents that want to hold a piece of paper in their hands have that piece of paper to hold in their hands as we're talking about the handouts. And I like the idea of parents being able to watch videos twice. Some of the videos are really fast moving and it's hard to catch everything in the first viewing. So if they have a chance to watch it ahead of time and then you show the video during the session, that gives them a little bit more ability to absorb the message and start to think about questions that they might have. Just like in person, you want to issue content warnings. We do that for Our Whole Lives. When we talk about particularly challenging topics, we'll warn the students or the adults if we're doing adult OWL. This is a challenging topic and take care of yourself. So issue those same content warnings for virtual use. And if you're sending out videos ahead of time, warn them if you think a video will be challenging for them to watch. Groups, big groups especially, you might want to offer breakout rooms for larger groups. So you do the presenting part of it with the big group, and then when it comes to discussing, make breakout rooms and have smaller groups. I would say you don't want to have more than 10 or 12 people in the discussion part. So if your entire program has more than 10 or so people, consider breaking out for the discussion. So there's 5 in each one. That way you can get through everybody and have adequate time to share. You're going to run into panicked parents who might say something like, halfway through the program, my kid's only 6. I don't want to be thinking about things like this for my 6-year-old. And one of the ways that you can handle a concern like that is that when you start the conversations with your children when they're young, you have so much more ease when you get to those really challenging topics that you have to start talking about with your older children when they start dating, when they start to be in relationships. It just allows for more natural conversations. The earlier we start, the better the conversations are when they become teens and young adults.
Robin?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Before you move on, have you mixed like parents with different age children? So you have a parent of a 6th grader and a parent of a 10th grader. How has that worked?
I have had parents of kindergarten age children with, I don't think there were high school parents, but middle school parents for sure. And it worked just fine. But that was a literal quote from years ago when I ran a parenting program, and the parent of a 6-year-old said, I don't even want to think about this. This is too overwhelming. But we talked through it and assured her that it was important for her to start thinking about these issues before she had to start talking to her child. And she stayed through the entire program. So I've never had a challenge of people deciding this is too much. Yeah. Oh, now I lost panicked parents. So I always just assure them this is a lifelong conversation and that we want to be open and available to our children when they want to talk about these type of things. Because there might be prior trauma in parents, that might make it extra challenging for them to gain a sense of comfort around sexuality topics. And so we can talk to them about how practice makes it easier. I know when I went to my very first sexuality training to be a facilitator, and I talk about this when I train ALF facilitators, my trainer said, stand in front of a mirror and say the word you're most afraid of saying until you don't blush when you say it. And so I literally went home after that week and said penis, 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 penis over and over again until I didn't blush. And it really did pay off. It allowed me to have some ease and to not be nervous and to be really comfortable with students when I was working with them. Also, assure your parents it's okay for them to say to their children that it's hard to talk about this stuff, that you're nervous, that you might make mistakes. That's acknowledging to them that they might have challenging conversations when they're at the point where they want to have conversations with their partners. That, yeah, this is a little bit hard to talk about. It might be a little bit embarrassing and it's important, so we're going to do it. Make sure that you preview all the videos and readings ahead of time as the facilitator to make sure that you're able to issue content warnings for sensitive topics. Some of the videos and readings have discussions around self-harm or suicide or abuse and assault. And these are real concerns for our children. So we don't want to skip these topics. We just want to make sure that parents are prepared for the topics. Remind participants, just like you would in an Our Whole Lives class or any other sexuality class, about self-care, that if they need to mute, if they need to turn off the camera, if they need to take a break, that all of that is permissible. And if participants reveal prior trauma, take some time to acknowledge it in the moment and take a minute to just breathe and just allow that ability to let that knowledge settle and acknowledge it. We are not meant to be therapists when we're running this program. So when you run into challenging situations, you might want to refer that person to the minister or other religious professional in your organization, or to offer local resources or hotlines or that type of thing. And again, make sure you know your congregational policies on mandatory reporting as well as state requirements. So who do you need to notify in addition to family services? If someone exhibits trauma response, follow up with them. Make sure they're okay. So age range, we already talked a little bit about wide age ranges, and it's helpful to acknowledge that there are differing concerns among parents with younger and older children. And if you're going to do breakout rooms, maybe you want to consider breakout rooms for different age groups of the children of the parents or caregivers, as a way to make the conversations easier. And that's what I have. So I'm ready for questions.
Great, because we have some for you.
All right, awesome.
So I know you talked about not having more than like 10 or 12 folks in a breakout or discussion group. Do you have a suggestion for a minimum number, Robin? Like what's too small? If 3 parents want to get together and talk to this, is that too small?
Well, I don't think it would be too small for parents to get together and talk about this. I think the decision needs to be, do you have facilitators who are available and able to facilitate the program for that smaller group? Or do you want to wait until you have a larger group? That's what I would base, as a director of religious education, that's what I would base my decision on is, is it more important to do the small group or to wait until we have enough facilitators?
Robin, there was a question about whether information is in the curriculum for parents of neurodivergent children and youth, or if you have any suggestions for them.
I'm trying to remember, Melanie. I don't think there is anything specifically in there. So if you know that there will be parents of neurodivergent children, acknowledging that is going to help. I'm not sure that I would actually do anything differently, because those parents have to think about the same topics. They have to decide when the right time is to broach those topics with them. It's conceivable that parents of neurodiverse children will have more challenges with children not understanding topics or not being ready. And we still need to talk to them, right? Because we still want to make sure that they're safe and protected and understand how to negotiate and navigate through the world.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would recommend that folks listening in do, and Amy, you can answer if the UCC has similar resources. If you go to the search bar at uua.org and type in inclusion resources or special education, you can get to our page that has resources for families that have kids with all sorts of differing needs. Also, if you go to the uua.org/re/owl/facilitators page, which is where you would have gone to register for this if you didn't register on the UCC's page, there are a variety of resources, including there's a document called A Special Education Approach to Our Whole Lives, which is an excerpt from the 7 to 9 curriculum. Parents are welcome to review that and look for the suggestions that are recommended for use in Our Whole Lives programs, and see if that would work in their own homes to facilitate conversations. Also, there is a recorded General Assembly webinar with OWL trainer Raymond Selov, who is autistic, and did a wonderful presentation on how to facilitate Our Whole Lives programs in a way that is welcoming and comfortable for kids on the spectrum. And so I think if people avail themselves of those resources, that might help them just get a few extra skills, whether they're talking with their own children or helping parents and caregivers who are doing that. Another resource that parents can do is to talk to their school and see what the school is offering and recommendations that the school have. But so much of this is individual, because parents and caregivers know the kids best. And one of the things that struck me with Raymond's presentation, because Raymond is autistic, as is his son, and he was very open about saying, when we're talking about sexuality with young people who are neuroatypical, it's really, as you said, Robin, really important to make sure they understand what's going on in a very concrete way. For example, he said that he taught his son, he and his wife taught his son, that because he's not going to be able to read subtle facial cues or some of the social cues that people have, it's really important for him to get in the habit of saying, do you want this? Or is this okay? Tell me what you want. And it can be hard for the partners or the romantic interests who aren't used to having to have that bold, honest kind of communication. Like, I really want you to touch me here. That's not something that teenagers are used to having to communicate, but they need to do that to keep their partners safe. So that's a wonderful resource for parents to watch, is that webinar on how to make an autism OWL program that's helpful for autistic youth.
Yeah, and I just want to say, in terms of UCC resources, we don't have a lot of specific things like that, though we are working towards developing more of them in conjunction with some of our different kind of, siloed places in the UCC, and breaking down those barriers and building bridges and things like that. So what I will offer is that when we send up a follow-up email to this webinar, Melanie and I can get some of those resources, links to those resources that she just mentioned, so that those can go in there and you would have links to those. I want to just follow up too, because there's another question about recommending delivery of the program in a way that's welcoming to meet the needs of participants and families of kids who are disabled, trans, non-binary, and racialized. And what I want to say about that, and then ask Robin if you have anything else to add, and this is kind of like a segue from an add-on to what Melanie was just talking about in terms of neuroatypical young people. And that is that, as Robin said multiple times, this is not a class. This is not an information situation. So rather than our thinking about this as like, how do I give this information to these parents to give to these children, it sounds to me, and from what I've read, and I haven't facilitated it yet, but it is more of a supportive group for parents. And so, like, bring it all and have discussions about how to support parents, because parents are going to have all different, their own individual issues with their own individual children that will be as diverse and beautiful as every family in your congregation. So, so being able to support people and figuring out the best way for them to be the primary sexuality educator to their children is more what this is, and offering space to be able to kind of wrestle with that and figure it out with supportive people rather than just being alone. Robin, what would you add to that?
So in particular with the gender session and the orientation session, really those are built to help parents explore their own concerns, their own fears for their children, because even when we are fully supportive of anything other than cisgender straight, we might still worry about our children. We do still worry about our children, even cisgendered straight, right? We worry. So the sessions are aimed at pull it out, acknowledge those fears and concerns for the children that we're working with, and figure out what is the value you want to transmit to them, what is the discussion you want to have with them. Get ready to have the conversation before it hits you in the face. So it's all about pulling out the feelings. It's all about what are the things that you need to consider for your house, your children, your situation.
I think that's one of the real strengths of this program, is supporting parents and caregivers as their children's primary sexuality educators, and really empowering them to make the best choices for their individual families, as opposed to the curriculum saying, this is the value you have to share. That said, you know, there are UU values threaded through it, and the UCC version will have UCC values threaded through theirs as well. But for people on this webinar who are not looking for that, can you talk a little bit about how that could be teased out for somebody who wants this to be completely faith-free?
Well, so the program itself is very sex positive. It acknowledges that children are sexual beings from birth to death, just like our whole lives. I mean, it uses the circles of sexuality as the basis of the program. And so all of the values that are transmitted through our whole lives programs are embedded in this program. I would say that if you're offering it to a community group rather than a religious group or a faith-based group, you perhaps need to say this is a program that is supportive of all orientations and all genders. You might need to make that clear. You know, my children went to a charter school when they were young. And that charter school decided to implement our whole lives all the way up through the middle school level, because the school went through 8th grade. And they had parents actually leave the school because they were going to teach about homosexuality. And that might happen if you're doing a community group. I think you need to advertise it as a program that is an inclusive program, but it is definitely built as an inclusive program. And the readings and the videos are just, that's what they are. It's all about, here's how life can be really miserable for a gay person, and here's what I need you to do to support me in my gayness. Since I just watched that video recently, that's the one that came to my mind. The program values are the values of our whole lives. And I think with the readings and other material that's embedded in there, it becomes very clear that these are the values that this program builds.
Thanks, Robin. A real easy question, I think. If you'd reiterate how long each session is, that would be great.
90 minutes.
Thank you.
90 minutes, yeah.
And then somebody's asking about sort of gender representation, if male identified folks are harder to get to participate. And you know, I don't know that this has been out for a little while, but it came out and then we had the pandemic. So I don't know how much, you know, actual, you know, sort of hard info we have about people's experiences with this. I would recommend that if you have feedback, if you run it, that you let us know. I do want to say that, you know, bless you, Robin, for bringing up, you know, some of the tips like Jamboard and some other things that we can use to do kind of things online, and how that is adaptable for this program with adults in a different way than the safety concerns we have about doing our whole lives online with youth are. So so we appreciate the challenges that everyone continues to have around wanting to offer high quality sexuality education in their faith communities during this time, and using our whole lives as a resource. And we welcome your feedback about that. And as many of you know, we do have, when you can't do I'll do this, that is posted on the UUA and UCC Our Whole Lives pages, and will be coming out in the Our Whole Lives newsletter as well. I wanted to say,
May I just interject
yeah,
before we go on to
yeah.
something else? I mean, I've been teaching parenting type of classes about sexuality for 2 decades now. And I can tell you that my experience, and this is just me and what I've experienced, I usually get about 1/3 male identified and 2/3 female identified is the typical participation. And I'm running this online right now with my minister, and that's true for this group too. We have 2 males and 4 females in our group, and so it's running just fine with 6 adults and 2 facilitators. So that's definitely not too small a group.
Great, thank you. One other thing I wanted to bring up, I had just made a note when you were talking about challenging topics and content warnings and stuff. And I just wanted to lift up and reiterate that we know that anytime we are in a group of really any size, that we can assume there are survivors amongst us. So just really know that the statistics around sexual assault and sexual abuse are so endemic in our society that that there you will have people, whether they disclose that to you or not, you will have people in your groups who have survived that. So be aware of that, and again, lifting up that this is written to be a small group ministry. So if you're approaching it with that tenderness and that skill set in mind in terms of who would be facilitating and who will be support people for those who are facilitating, that it's not something to just throw online and without much forethought, but to really look at the material, which is very well written, very much along the lines of an Our Whole Lives facilitator manual, very much, very much with a lot of great information. Some of the tips, as Melanie said in the chat, some of the tips that you've received today from Robin are, from her experience and from having done this since the material was published. So that's why we have this webinar, and it is being recorded, so it will be available for folks afterwards. I have a couple more announcements. I want to make sure we're getting all the questions. Melanie, what other questions do you see? Yeah.
To your point, Amy and Robin, about selecting someone to facilitate this, or 2 people if you have 2 people. One of the things that Our Whole Lives facilitator training does is help people assess themselves over the course of the training, and have trainers assess them for their comfort discussing these things, for their ability to put their own sexual history into perspective and not let it affect them as they're working with the curriculum. And that it might be actually something to discuss with somebody that you're asking to consider facilitating this program, because you're not going to have the benefit unless you use an already trained OWL person. You're not going to have the benefit of having had them do that self-reflection. So as Amy said, have them read the curriculum, maybe have a conversation about boundaries, and that this is not about the facilitators disclosing their own experiences. This is about them facilitating the exploration of the people in the program. So anyone coordinating a program will have to take a great deal of responsibility for having what could be a delicate conversation, but is absolutely important for the facilitator's emotional safety, as well as for the comfort and safety of the people in the room, the virtual room.
And as with anything, y'all have local authority, and but we really hope you'll hear us, because between the 3 of us, we have decades of experience of having done this type of work around sexuality education in faith communities, and knowing what needs to be in place to make it go well. and what can happen if those things are not in place and it does not go well. So we really hope that you will heed this lovingly given and hard-earned advice from us. There was a question in the chat about receiving Our Whole Lives training. Before I go there, is there anything else that we need to address, particularly about the parents and caregivers as sexuality educators?
Yeah, I put the link in the chat. So you can go to uua.org and in the search bar, just type in parents and caregivers and it'll pop right up. It is a free download. It is loaded by workshop. So somebody had said, can we pick and choose which ones we do? You know, this enables you to print them out one at a time. You can print out the handouts, as Robin was saying, to email those handouts to participants in advance. So it's a very flexible, free curriculum.
I want to add one thing about the handouts too, which I realized I forgot to mention. The handouts are editable Word documents. And my hope is that you will put local resources in there to add, because all the resources that are on the materials handout, I forget what it's called, resources handout. All of those are national organizations. And so do go in and edit it. And for example, I put the website for our local PFLAG group in the orientation section and the gender section, so that parents would know there are support groups that are meeting right now online virtually, and here's how you can find them.
Yeah, I also just want, somebody asked, is there any costs? And Melanie just had said, no, it's a free download. And I want to assure you that we have funding for the UCC adaptation too. So the intention is that will be a free to download resource through the UCC as well when it's available.
There was a question, Robin, whether you're going to share information about online training tools like Jamboard, and I'm going to let Robin off the hook. Robin wrote this curriculum as an in-person curriculum, and on her own initiative has gathered information and done this online herself. And so it's not Robin's bailiwick, if you will, to do an online tool training. There are lots and lots of resources on YouTube. If you want to learn about, interactive teaching using Google, there's, all sorts of dry erase boards on Google. Jamboard is something where you can do like Post-it notes electronically. So I would encourage you to do some learning on your own to find those wonderful resources.
Yeah, and I just want to say we can stick a couple pieces in there. It's something like that, Jamboard, YouTube, and there's a great resource on a website called Training for Change that has some adaptable Google slides that can be interactive. So we can stick a few of those things in the follow-up email. But just know that, as Melanie said, there is just a ton of information about how to do that, and you will know which ones work for you and your group better than we will. I'm seeing one more question in the, I'm not sure what to say about that question in the chat. Melanie, will you take a look at that one? And then I'm gonna just make a couple of announcements before we come back to that. One is that we would really, my precursor to this announcement is we would really appreciate it if you would not inundate us with email about this, because I'm going to tell you what it is we know right now. And that is that Melanie and I are working on putting together a pilot Our Whole Lives training for online. And we are hoping that we will be able to have that available this spring. And it will be through the UUA Learning Dash platform. We
and
do
for
not
the secondary level,
for the
grades
secondary
7 to 9
level for
and
7 to 9 and 10 through 12. We do not have a date for you yet about when that will be available. We do think that we will be recommending that people who take that online training be in a organization or faith community that already has some trained facilitators so that they can walk alongside them and accompany them, because it will not be the same as an in-person training. So that is coming. We are with you, waiting, hoping, wanting to have in-person trainings, all the while knowing that we cannot in good conscience recommend that right now, with all the information that we have, and all the variety of information, and the lack of solid, complete, universal information about how to make that safe for everyone. So we cannot in good conscience recommend that, having an in-person training at this point. Yeah,
Amy,
what else?
there's a question about how to stay informed. So
Yeah.
Amy is doing a lot of work putting together the OWL newsletter, which is published by her office, but open to everybody, whether secular, UU, Quaker, whatever. Everybody's welcome to subscribe to the OWL newsletter. And so you can learn through it there. If your folks, if you have facilitators, or if you're a program coordinator, you can get on the email lists and stay informed that way. We also post information on the OWL Facebook group. It's a public group for OWL folks who are just interested in it. So there's lots of ways that you can keep informed. And trust me, Amy and I will be broadcasting when we have an application process. We will be broadcasting it widely.
I did just put in the chat, right now we're having some transition in our ucc.org website. We've transitioned to a new platform and are dealing with all the common foibles that happen when anyone does that. And so at the moment, if you are not on the e-newsletter list and you would like to be, it comes out quarterly. The next one will probably be coming out sometime next week-ish. And the best way to get on that, if you aren't already, is to send me an email at owl@ucc.org with your name and email and requesting that, and then I can get you on that list.
I would like to share that next month's program will feature Michael Crumpler, who is with the UUA's Office of LGBTQ Public Witness Ministry. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting. But all things marginalized identities and LGBTQ, Michael is in charge of that for the UUA. And he will have a representative with him from the Canadian Unitarian Council, which recently conducted a survey of their clergy and their membership regarding ethical non-monogamy, what some people refer to as polyamory. And so we're going to be looking at the results that they found. They have some wonderful data, both in terms of numbers and commentary from people about their own experiences. And we'll be looking at, what can Unitarians everywhere, Canadians, people in the United States, what can folks from the UCC, we'll have a guest from the UCC, to discuss this very important topic that is affecting our members and our clergy and our families. So it doesn't mean that y'all have to be practicing ethical non-monogamy, because our people in our organizations, that's their life or the lives of their friends, our friends, ourselves, whatever. So I think it'll be a really interesting conversation to learn from the Canadians about what's going on up there and how we might be able to use that information to be ever more inclusive in our programming.
Yeah, and we'll have Reverend Dr. Chris Davies from the UCC with us as well. And again, it's not our title is Consensual Non-Monogamy and Faith, What Can We Learn from a Canadian Unitarian Council Survey? So that's, it's a learning, as Melanie said, a learning about what are people's actual lived experiences in conjunction with them also being people of faith, and how are we or are we not, or it's responding. And I guess actually, how are we responding? Because like we say with parents of sexuality educators, if you're not talking about it, that's still a response. So so what are our responses as our collective faith communities around this topic, and being aware. I
I did want to get get Michael Crumpler's title correct. He is the Programs Director of LGBTQ and Multicultural Programs. So,
Awesome.
So
we have
thank
some amazing staff on our national staffs and the Canadian Unitarian Council as well. We have some incredible people, and we are working to share them with you in this format and showcase some of their amazing work that intersects with our whole lives and the work that you all do.
So we'll see you the first Wednesday of next month at noon Eastern time. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.